Make It Right, the manufacturing podcast.
There's a funny thing about free. It sounds great in theory to entice prospects and customers to consider doing business with you by providing something for free. But in reality, people tend not to place any value on something that's free. Your free design sample, analysis, or report may be viewed as simply a sales tool, negating the value it may have and putting no value on the time and expertise you invest. This week on Make It Right, my guest is Joe Sullivan. He is the thinker and founder of Gorilla 76, a St. Louis company that works with mid-sized manufacturing companies on their marketing initiatives. Joe recently wrote a great two-part article on why and how to stop giving your engineering and consulting away for free. Instead, he suggests starting with low-commitment, high-value consulting engagement. And he's here to explain those ideas. So thanks for being on Make It Right, Joe. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, great to talk to you too, Janet.
So I know that you started this whole journey from the standpoint of a marketing company. So what turned the light on for you about giving away your time and expertise for free?
Yep. So, it's kind of a thing in the marketing and advertising world where, there's almost this expectation that you're going to do a bunch of, free spec work to win the job, but whether that's design or writing or some kind of strategy or research to prove that, you've got the brain power and the chops to, come up with the right solution for the prospective client. And you're probably up against a bunch of other companies doing the same. And so, I wanted to kind of challenge that a few years ago. And there were a few different sources that sort of inspired me to do it, but it just felt like, why are we doing all this work when, in a lot of cases, the company we're doing this work for probably knows who they're going to choose anyway.
So you suggested breaking off 5% of the prospect's estimated budget for a project and charging that for the initial problem solution analysis, or as you call it, the diagnostics. And that's step one down the engagement path. So explain how all of this works.
Sure. So let's just say, I'm just going to use a round number. Let's say that your typical engagement with a customer is a $100,000 engagement, just for the sake of a round number. And you know that your solution is probably going to be somewhere in that range, maybe give or take 25%. Maybe the same thing for the companies you're competing against to win that work. And you're trying to kind of come up with ideas to demonstrate that you're going to be the best fit. Well, my thought process here is, instead of doing all this work on your own time, unpaid, to figure out what that huge $100,000 solution should be, what if instead you said, okay, hey, client, this is our process. We charge $5,000 for this process, and here's what we do. We have this discovery call with you. That's maybe a 2-hour conversation or whatever it might be. Then we leave, we go do some research. We put our best brains on it, and we can afford to do that because we're being paid to do it. And then we come back with a proposed solution for you where, we haven't cut corners. We've been able to put the time to it that it deserves. And we're going to bring an objective solution to the table for you and say, this is what we think you should do in order to get from point A to point B. You can hire us to implement it for you. You can shop it out to other companies like us. You can handle it internally, but this is what you need to do to achieve what you're trying to accomplish.
So we're looking at this from the standpoint of you as a marketer, or are we looking at this as a standpoint as a manufacturer, or does it really matter because it's all kind of the same process?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it's all kind of the same. And I think it applies to any company that sells a complex custom solution to, so I'm talking about companies who aren't selling widgets off the shelf, right? Not smaller ticket items or items that would be classified more as a commodity than a custom item. But if you're a type of organization that you lean on the deep expertise and experience of your team to deliver very custom solutions that require a consultative sales process and often a longer buying process where there are different people involved. That's where something like this makes a lot of sense. And so that's true, across the board for a lot of companies in the marketing space where we're trying to solve a complex, business development challenge like lead generation or, establishing awareness in front of the right people from the right companies. And it also applies, for companies who make things that are custom too. So, our audience that we work with at Gorilla is mid-size manufacturers, and a lot of the clients we have sell some kind of big ticket, custom product that, comes with a lot of customizations. It can be very different from one situation to the next. So there's often service that comes with it. And, it's a very, very consultative custom process. So I think that applies there too, because there's a problem to be solved up front before the exact solution can really be determined.
Okay, so I have to ask you, you thought of taking this new approach, charging for this time that you invest. What did it feel like the first time you put that price on an initial project and told your client or prospect that you wanted to be paid for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it would have been very hard to retrofit that process to somebody we had done work for in the past and was used to getting all this free thinking and advice up front. But when we sort of, started with a clean slate for new future customers, it was maybe a little bit scary or nervous. I was a little nervous about it, but it was exciting at the same time because I was just sort of curious to see what would happen. And, the risk was generally low. If we were, the worst thing that happens is we wouldn't win the job. And, at that point, I think our win rate on engagements where we'd go down this long path of doing all this free research and putting together a custom proposal. Our win rate was something like 1 in 3, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't amazing either. So, there was a 2 out of 3 chance we were going to lose it anyway. So why not give this a try and see if we couldn't, secure the first part of the project and give ourselves a chance to earn trust and attention. So I think it was a combination of some excitement, but also, being nervous. Are we doing something that's completely off the wall here?
So what was the reaction?
Honestly, I can't remember the exact first one we did because we did a handful of them at once. I just said, okay, this is how we're going to try to start doing this. And, it was probably over the course of the first month of doing this, we're probably, we got a few of these out the door as proposals for more of a strategy project. Now, it was a really good feeling actually, because all of a sudden I had something that was more standard and scalable. The first proposal that I sent out the door wasn't some huge custom research proposal. It was a standard process. It said, this is the first thing we do. And so it didn't take much time to put it together. And we got some bites on it very quickly. And then what was the most surprising thing to me that I hadn't even considered was that, we used to have trouble for a free discovery meeting that we would usually run for 90 to 120 minutes. We would ask for the CEO or president, the VP of sales, the head of marketing to come to the table for these free discovery meetings where we would give away all this expertise and do a custom consultation with the client. And, they'd say, yeah, okay, that group can attend. And then what would happen is, the CEO would have something more pressing to do and he wouldn't show up. And then this person over here, she would have to leave halfway through because she had to catch up on her email or had some other commitment. And so I had, half the attention of about half the people who I needed for this to really be successful. And we were giving it away for free. So there were a lot of frustrations there. When we started all of a sudden charging, all of a sudden, the client had some skin in the game. The right people showed up, and not only that, they showed up on time. They had, had their full attention, and all of a sudden, there weren't these layers to go through and different people to loop in for future meetings. Everybody we needed to be present was there from day one, and that just made a huge difference across the board.
Yeah, so they're actually paying for your time. They know that, so they actually, show up because they've made that investment. Is it the same reaction that your manufacturing clients are getting when they do this type of approach to a proposal?
Yeah, we're seeing similar things happen. It's very much in beta mode for a couple of our first few clients that we're sort of, we've helped them sort of brand and package and put together, an offering that is sort of their version of this. So it's a little bit early to make that judgment for our own clients, but from what we've seen so far, yeah, it's a very similar thing. Because what happens here is, not if you can name your process. And for us, for example, we call it the industrial marketing roadmap, and there's a set price. These are the steps you go through. These are the people who need to attend. Here's the information you need to provide us ahead of time. It creates this, this from an outsider's perspective. It's a very buttoned up thing. It's very clear you've done this before. That you have a methodology for this. You're not just kind of winging it. So that's starting to translate as well for our clients who are doing the same thing. It just makes you look very buttoned up front, which our clients are. It's just you don't necessarily see that if it's not sort of branded and packaged and almost productized.
So earlier you were talking about this diagnostics that you would do as part of this first step in the process that your client pays for. What shape does a diagnostic like this take for a manufacturing company, or can it be a variety of shapes?
Yeah, I think it can come in a variety of shapes. So let me give you a little bit of context to just talk about how ours works, and then I'll give you some ideas for how that could be applied in different ways for a manufacturer and their customers. So for us, our industrial marketing roadmap is essentially there's a few steps here. The first thing we do is we send out a discovery survey with information we need to collect from the client that sort of gets the 101 stuff out of the way. And so we collect that at least a week before the discovery consultation happens. When the discovery consultation happens, that is a 4-hour meeting. We usually typically just book it for the morning or the afternoon of a specific day. These people attend. We ahead of time have done a little bit of research based on the information we gathered so we can ask the right questions. And our goal during that meeting is to gather all the information we need that is sort of missing, fill in those holes so that we can then go perform some additional research after the fact and put together recommendations. And then we come back 2 weeks later and with a very buttoned up roadmap document that says, okay, based on everything we've learned, this is what you need to do to be successful. Whether you hire us or somebody else, or do some of this yourself, or do some of it yourself and hire somebody else to do the rest of it. This is what you need to do. Here are a few different ways you can implement these recommendations as well. So that's our version. Now, maybe there's a very similar way a manufacturer could implement the same sort of thing in their business. But here are a few ideas. One, this I would consider to be, say, a paid consulting engagement. You could do paid consulting or engineering, where it's a very specific process or some defined scope of work that's meant for discovery to help figure out the solution. Another idea would be a site audit. Could you come on site, walk into somebody's facility, and these are the specific things you're going to be looking for. Like if you're, say, an industrial automation company, you could come in and do a very specific audit where you look at different ways to create efficiencies along a production line, what equipment might replace older equipment that appears to be nearing end of life. Whatever that stuff might be, you go in knowing what you're looking for over a 2-hour period, and then you come back a week later, or maybe not come back, but even just get on a call and you deliver similar to our roadmap, a buttoned up sort of summary that says, okay, these are our recommendations at 3 different pricing tiers. If you want us to implement it, here's kind of how we would do it. So that's an idea, a site audit.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing would be, say, a second opinion service. We've sort of helped one of our longstanding clients is in the construction industry, and there's a lot of corner cutting that happens in that industry, and so our client will come in and do like a second opinion service around before their customer would make a big investment one way or another. Another thing you could do is a research report. Could you be, if there's research to be done, like market research or something, maybe you could do that to help a client make a decision. And then another one I think would be, say, a product sample or a prototype. If there's a big solution to be built out, could the prototype itself be, this is probably a more standard practice that maybe companies are already doing, but a lot of companies may not be thinking of it that way. Could you put together some sort of mini sample or prototype that would help build confidence that the bigger solution would work? So those are kind of a variety of ideas.
Mm-hmm. It used to be, or it may still be, the practice that a lot of this stuff gets given away for free. And, the odds of somebody coming up with a really good solution and then them not winning the job, where they take that report and run off to somebody else and say, hey, can you put this into play? I mean, I don't know how often that happens, but at least you've been paid for your expertise, and, people can move on, and you're not out of pocket after 50 hours of unpaid work. I think it's actually a great idea to do it this way. And I think, your average business owner is going to see the value on it. I want to ask you about the spectrum of value creation. Now, you talk about this a lot in the second article that I read. And can you break this down from the standpoint of how a manufacturer would go through this spectrum of value creation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is an idea that's just sort of been floating around in my head for a long time. And I finally got it down in writing and made a little graphic to represent it. But the idea is this: when you're an expert in what you do, and a lot of the things I've said are true earlier. You have a complex custom solution. The sales process is consultative. It's not just your customer is going to buy this or this, and here's the price tag. It's more complex than that. There are a lot of different ways that you can deliver value to your customer. And, for us at Gorilla in the marketing world, it was years back, there was this free, long, drawn out research and discovery process where we would create a lot of value, and it was completely free. It was, we were just giving it away in hopes we'd win the job. And then there was the big, what for us was typically $60,000 to $100,000 commitment for, to launch a marketing program over the course of a year or so. And that was really it. Those were the ways we could create value. And so, what I would look at is, what are all the other ways that we could create value for somebody in a way that would, incrementally build trust? And so the spectrum of value creation, which works for us, but also works for really anybody who is, delivering custom expertise in their solution, could play out like this. I in my graphic, in my article, I have seven different ways that you could create value listed. And these aren't the only ways, but the first one would be, on the far left is low commitment. On the far right is high commitment. So on the far left, you've got, an article. You could take, a question or a problem that you're hearing all the time from your best customers. This is something we're always struggling with, and then that they're always struggling with, and how to provide the solution. So, this could just be an article explaining or answering a question or helping solve a problem. It's a free article or blog post that lives on your website, and it creates value for somebody. They don't have to pay for it. It's just there for the world to see. And so that's sort of the lowest form of commitment or engagement between you and a prospective customer, where you're delivering value in exchange for 10 minutes of their time to engage with your content and read your article. The next step along the spectrum of value creation would be a gated resource. So, you've probably been on websites before where, you're reading an article or a page, and then you're prompted to download a white paper or a buyer's guide, or fill out this ROI calculator, or, register for a webinar or subscribe to a newsletter. And all of these things usually require you to submit some contact information. And so now you're asking for a little bit more commitment from your prospective customer here. They're giving you permission to market to them by giving you their name, their email address, their phone number, their company name. You're generating a new lead for yourself, but they have to give something up for the greater value you're giving them in the form of an asset. The next step up would be a free consultation. So our version of a free consultation, as I've explained, used to be just go way too far. We'd wind up 20, 40 hours into doing research and providing all this value for free. But I think the free consultation that should happen is something like, let's talk about your situation for an hour over a phone call or a Zoom meeting. That would be a perfect way to do it. Now you're giving away an hour of your time or expertise, and it's very defined. You could say, this is what we're going to do in the consultation. We're going to ask these questions, so come prepared to answer those. And we're going to help try to point you in the right direction, whether that means you're going to hire us or you're going to go in another direction. So that's the free consultation. And then from there, I think you can move into paid engagements. So one example would be right now we just launched a membership site. This could make sense for some manufacturers in the form of training or some sort of premium content where in order to access that content, somebody's got to pay. We're playing with a membership site where we have a few different tiers where somebody could pay, $50 a month to attend live weekly Q&As where I'm there. And what maybe every other week, one of my experts, a copywriter or a marketing strategist or a designer is there with me to just answer questions. But there's some premium access to you that's being given, but it could be scalable. So that would be, say, paid content. Now somebody's actually committing some hard cash to access your expertise in a more one-on-one way. After that, that's when I think you'd move into the paid discovery action plan, our version of a roadmap, or what we've spent the first part of this call talking about. And then the last two steps would be, maybe there's a preliminary implementation, but also a flagship implementation. So like for us, the preliminary implementation is what we call a phase one marketing plan. If the roadmap that we created, if the client decides, yeah, we want to hire you, Gorilla, to do this, well, they're, as opposed to committing to a long-term retainer with us or something like that, we're going to ask them to commit to a 6-month phase one plan where we knock out the most important priority projects that'll help jumpstart their initiative, but not require them to commit for the long term. And then our flagship implementation would be more of an ongoing marketing retainer, which we have a few clients who've been with us for 6+ years, one that's been with us for 10 years. And, for them, it's recurring revenue for us, and we've learned their business really well. But, we're not essentially what you're doing here is you're not asking somebody to go from a first date to getting married. You're creating steps before the first date and between the first date and getting married to allow trust to be built, to be able to demonstrate that you can produce results along the way. And it's just a much more natural progression.
Joe, and I think the key thing here, and like we're looking at it from a marketing perspective, we're looking at it from a manufacturing perspective, but there are manufacturers there with tons of knowledge. They could easily write that article and just get their name and their sort of develop their thought leadership out there in the greater world. And then, as you say, it just pushes people to, they see somebody, they go, oh, that's Joe from Gorilla 76. He's great. I'll go to that gated resource and see what else they've got. And then it just sort of, as you say, it's a bit of a courtship, and you're walking down the path. And naturally, you may never get to any of those payment things, but for a manufacturer, it certainly opens the door up and gets you out there to a larger audience, I would think, than you probably ever get just by sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring where somebody wants you to do a discovery call or a consultation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it there, Janet. It's this idea that, you're an expert in something. Let's give away a little bit of that expertise to help you get discovered by people who are out there looking for a solution or an answer to a question that you're able to answer, or trying to solve a problem, and you can help sort of guide them along the way. And by doing so, you're doing exactly what you said. You're establishing yourself as a thought leader. While all your competitors are out there, their websites are filled with brochure content that just talks about how great they are and all the things that you should buy from them. You're out there actually helping solve problems. And, who do you think is going to be top of mind when they reach the point in their buying process where they actually need to make a buying decision? Who are they going to call first? The one that's been talking about themselves, or the one that's been helping them along the way with content?
Hmm. I think, and now is a particularly key time to be thinking differently as a manufacturer, right? Because, I mean, there's a lot of people that are very stalled in their manufacturing at this point in time, and now is a great time to be sort of building up that thought leadership and figuring out ways to be helpful so that you can get to those customers who need your help and are willing to pay for your help. I'm curious to know how you've seen the buyer's mindset change as this approach is taken. Now, I know you talked about it a little bit earlier, but as this progresses and you grow along with it and you're using these the paid content and things like that, what changes are you seeing?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and there are a handful of things here that come to mind. So when you can start, if you were to implement something like this, what I've decided to call the spectrum of value creation, and you start operating this way, the first thing that happens is the sale starts before you ever even talk to your prospect.
Hmm. That's so important, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about the difference. I see it all the time because we've been producing content for so long that is just educational in nature. And there are times where I will get on a first call with somebody, and we use software, like we use HubSpot as our marketing automation software and CRM. And so I can see, if somebody's filled out a form on our site, I can see all the pages they've viewed on our site. How many times they've come back to our site, and all of that stuff helps set up my first call with them. Because if I look, if I jump on a first, free consultation, the sort of 1 hour call, in fact, I have one right after this interview coming up. And what I can do is I can look at this person's profile, their contact record in HubSpot, and see, okay, this person has viewed they landed on our homepage, and then they filled out the consultation request form. All right, well, they clearly haven't done a whole lot of vetting of my company. I'll look at other people, and they maybe landed on our site through, an article that was about lead generation for manufacturers, which means they, out of organic search, meaning they probably Google searched that. So they were trying to look for a solution in the first place. And then I could see they might have viewed 15 other articles on our site, looked at a few case studies, looked at our team page, and clicked on a few of our people's profiles. And then they looked at our who we help and how page and another case study. And all of a sudden now this person is showing some level of buying intent. And I can see that they've started, they know a lot about us at this point. They've looked at how we've solved problems for others. They've read our thought leadership content, and it results in a completely different first sales conversation. The sale already started. The sale started in maybe 2 hours they've already spent with us, because we have all this information out there that's meant to help them. So that's when I say the sales starts before you ever talk, that's kind of what I'm referring to. So that's kind of the first mindset change thing that I see. The next one we touched on already is this idea that your prospect has skin in the game, or your prospect who is now at least a preliminary customer. They've got some skin in the game. The decision makers are going to be more willing to come to the table and give attention because there's been an outlay of cash on their end. The other thing here is that sort of affects you, I guess, more than anything, is you can now give it your all. Like your buyer, your prospect can now feel confident, and you can say with confidence, we're putting our smartest brains on solving this problem because you can afford to do so. You're being paid for the work, as opposed to saying, we gotta crank out this proposal. It's going to take 20 hours. Who's got time? This guy over here does, so we'll just throw him on it. Well, now you can budget for this and staff accordingly, knowing that you're selling these paid engagements and that you want your experts on it. And then the last two things, your customer, I guess, first of all, your customer doesn't want to backtrack. If they're this far in, they've got some skin in the game, and you've been doing your job demonstrating your expertise and creating value. Well, by the time you bring your proposed solution to the table, why would they want to start over with someone else as long as you've done your job? You've had an opportunity now to earn their trust. And if it isn't a fit at this point, well, then it wasn't meant to be anyway. And you probably shouldn't be in this relationship that's not going to work out really well for you or them. So, I think the fear, the one thing I suspect some listeners might be thinking as well, what if they take my solution and go elsewhere? I think it's very unlikely to happen. In fact, we've never seen it happen. In doing this in 2 years and probably having done 20 of these sorts of engagements, I can't think of a single situation. We've had some that haven't worked out, like they haven't hired us, but they've said, okay, we just don't have the budget to do the full implementation, but if and when we do, you're the ones we're going to come back to talk to. So they don't want to backtrack. And then the last thing, which is probably the most important thing, is you're not seen as a vendor anymore. All of a sudden you are being perceived as, you're not interchangeable with the next company around the corner. You have demonstrated your expertise. You're selling something that is more than just another service that 50 other companies could act on. You've got something unique to offer. And I kind of took that idea from, there's a marketing agency consultant named David Baker who we hired to do some work for us, and he sort of really hammered that home for us. And our positioning is you can't be an interchangeable vendor. You have to figure out how to differentiate yourself through expertise, and that completely applies in the manufacturing sector as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting too to think about, okay, so in the past, if you had done those free consultations and you're looking at it and going, oh my goodness, it's going to be X number of hours. Who has the time to do this when we may or may not win the job? Okay, just here, you just do it. And whether or not that person who did the proposal had the right insights and expertise and whatever it was, maybe the person who'd asked for that proposal really did want to hire you, but the proposal didn't provide what is the word I'm looking for? Didn't justify what your business could do for them because you weren't able to put the time in because you weren't getting paid, right? So it's kind of like this dog that's chasing the tail. You can see the reason why you would want somebody to pay for that consultation and why you would want to pay for that consultation, because you do want the best minds on it, because you've wasted your time trying to find somebody to solve your problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a very good chance that for those of you listening who do fall into this trap, there's a very good chance that your prospective customers actually want to buy this thinking from you, but you're just not offering it because you're kind of operating under the assumption that, well, the expectation is we'll do this engineering work for free, or this, investigative discovery process for free. That's just how people do it. But if you can deliver a much better product or service or solution by putting some senior people on it, or some most qualified people on it, there's a good chance that a lot of your prospects would prefer that anyway, and prefer outlaying some cash to get the solution in front of them that they're most confident is going to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, Joe. So how about just a couple of tips for people to get started down this path and start thinking about how they might want to approach the spectrum of value creation as a manufacturer, and how, to get some of these tools in place so they can maybe start pursuing this? Sure.
Well, I think the first thing to do is identify, is this a trap you're falling into? And if it is, to just start by thinking about what are some of the ways we could do this a little bit differently. How, what would be that first 5% or even 1 or 3% of an engagement that we could break off and sell as a standalone step one? So start with a brainstorm there. I think that's the best first step. And there's these articles that you've mentioned that we just published, that you can find if you go to gorilla76.com/learn, there are the part 1 and part 2 articles called How to Stop Giving Away Your Engineering and Consulting for Free. Take a look through those, and I think it'll give you a context for how to start thinking about that. But I would just start there. Do we have this problem, and what are some different ways we could address it?
Joe, this has really been a very valuable conversation. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. It was my pleasure to be a guest.
Joe Sullivan is a branding expert. He is a thinker and founder at Gorilla 76. They're based in St. Louis, and you can read more articles, as he mentioned, at their website, gorilla76.com. Learn. That's our show this week. Please check out our Twitter and LinkedIn feeds that are on our podcast page. You can subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues through iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. And don't forget that Make It Right is brought to you by Kevin Snook. He's a leadership advisor and author of the best-selling book, Make It Right, 5 Steps to Align Your Manufacturing Business from the Front Line to the Bottom Line. I'm Janet Eastman. I hope you have a great week, and thanks very much for listening to Make It Right.